A fight between Gennady Golovkin and his mandatory challenger, the WBA regular middleweight champion, Danny Jacobs, has just taken a step closer to happening. The reason being partly to do with the fact that Canelo Alvarez has injured his hand, which means he won't be able to fight in December. So that has freed up not only a television date for a potential Golovkin versus Danny Jacobs fight, but it's also freed up some of HBO's budget, which they were looking to spend on Canelo's fight in December. It's freed that up. Now they can spend it on a different fight, and HBO apparently are talking about making Golovkin versus Jacobs in December. How do you guys see this fight going? Some people believe that Danny Jacobs is actually the guy at middleweight who will give Golovkin his toughest tests. But whenever I think about Danny Jacobs, I can't help but have flashbacks of that Dmitry Pirog fight. This was obviously Danny Jacobs pre-cancer. And he got knocked out by Dmitry Pirog in pretty spectacular fashion. I mean, I think he was virtually out cold if he wasn't completely out cold. I can't help thinking about that and wondering about Danny Jacobs' chin. Now, many fighters have been knocked out cold who didn't have suspect chins or anything like that. I mean, you look at Paul Williams, he always had a pretty good chin. But in his rematch with Sergio Martinez, he got cracked on the jaw and knocked out cold. He went to sleep with his eyes open. That's how out cold he was. So maybe that's something to debate. What do you think about Danny Jacobs' chin? Again, you look at the first Sergio Mora fight. He was dropped and hurt by Mora. A guy who, at least on paper, is a non-puncher. He's certainly not a prolific puncher, and he's a smaller guy. He was able to hurt Jacobs. Can somebody as, in my opinion, fragile in terms of punch resistance as Jacobs really provide Gennady Golovkin with his stiffest tests? Some people might even be questioning Gennady Golovkin's punch power after his fight with Kell Brook. They're saying, well, why couldn't he put Brook down? The guy's a blown up welterweight. He was hitting Brook with everything and the guy stayed on his feet. Well, my argument to that would be, I think Brook takes a better punch at 160 than he took at 147. Just my opinion, but I think because he was so depleted at 147, and he really was depleted, I think it took a lot of his strength away. And also, I think that Kell Brook did a half decent job of pulling away when the punches were coming at him. Just swaying his upper body a little bit to take the sting off the shots. In the first round, he got caught pretty good with that left hook, which shook him up. But after that, he was kind of pulling away a lot of the time when Golovkin was landing those right hands and hooks and whatnot. So I personally think that took a lot of the sting off the shots. And had the fight not been stopped when it was, I reckon Golovkin would have landed more cleanly and you would have seen Kell Brook stretched out on the canvas. That's my personal view, but we'll never know because the fight was stopped. But either way, let me know what you guys think of Gennady Golovkin versus Danny Jacobs. Jacobs himself can punch. He might be, I don't know, I'm just putting this out there because this is something that some people are saying. Jacobs might be the biggest puncher that Golovkin has faced so far as a professional. What do you guys think about that? He certainly has some power there, and it was pretty impressive the way he was able to dispatch of Peter Quillin so quickly. And say what you like about Peter Quillin, he fought, various fighters Peter Quillin has fought, like Andy Lee, for example. Andy Lee did drop Peter Quillin. Lee was dropped himself early, but he managed to drop Peter Quillin in retaliation. But that fight still went 12 rounds. So a puncher who, and Andy Ruiz is a pretty decent puncher at middleweight. A puncher that big wasn't able to dispatch of Peter Quillin as easily as Danny Jacobs was. Danny Jacobs was. I thought the Jacobs Quillin fight was surprising. I didn't expect it to end that early, and I was pretty impressed by the way Jacobs was able to get him out of there as quickly as that. So, how much do you read into that? How much stock do you put in that performance in terms of assessing Jacobs' punch power, I've always felt as well that Peter Quillin was a bit chinny. I said in many videos about Peter Quillin that he fights with a scared look on his face, like this really edgy, jittery, he had this really jittery movement and a scared look on his face in all of his fights that I've seen of Peter Quillin anyway. And I was always thinking, why does he look like that? Why is he so jittery? Is this guy worried about his chin? And I think that's what it was, personally, that Peter Quillin always was suspicious about his own chin. He always feared that he couldn't take a particularly good shot, and that's why he always looked as scared and as jittery as he was. I don't know that for certain, but that's my interpretation of it anyway. So, maybe it's a case of Danny Jacobs taking out a guy with a poor chin early on, which maybe isn't such a glowing endorsement of Danny Jacobs' punching power. But from a stylistic point of view, how do you think he would do against Golovkin? Do you think he's quick enough on his feet? Do you think he has enough power to get Golovkin's respect and keep him off? Make Golovkin think rather than just rushing in the way he did against Kell Brook. Kell Brook seems to think that he actually hurt Gennady Golovkin. Other people disagree. I tend to be in the camp which says that Kell Brook didn't really hurt Gennady Golovkin because Golovkin just kept steaming forward at him. If he hurt him, I think Golovkin would have been a bit more circumspect because he has been circumspect in other fights. Up until he dropped Curtis Stevens, and even after he dropped him in certain spots, he was a bit careful and circumspect about how he attacked Curtis Stevens because he got tagged with a couple shots and he was like, okay, let me think about this. But I never saw that in the Kell Brook fight. Well, actually, maybe he did do it a little bit in the Brook fight, but when Abel Sanchez said step on the gas, he stepped on the gas. And he came charging out like a bat out of hell. He came flying out, he was like a bull in a china shop, just dashing around the ring, trying to get after Kell Brook and destroy him. So I don't think he really respected Brook's power. Would he respect Danny Jacobs' power? And that's what you're going to need against Gennady Golovkin if you're going to hope to survive. Unless you've got an iron jaw or a ridiculously good defense, then you're going to need the power to get Golovkin's respect. That's the only way to keep him off you. Yeah? No other way of doing it. Does Danny Jacobs have enough power to do that? Does he have the boxing skills? Does he have the defense, the footwork, etc., etc.? Would you like to see this fight next, or would you prefer Golovkin to fight somebody else in December? It is his mandatory at the end of the day, so he's going to have to fight him sooner or later. Personally, I can't grumble at the fight. I mean, it's not a unification. It's just the consolidation of the regular WBA belt with the WBA super belt that Golovkin already holds. So it's kind of a head scratcher, and I guess it's just a license for the WBA to print money. Having these ridiculous amount of belts per division. It is what it is. Let me know how you feel about the fight. Let me know how you feel about the style matchup. How do you think the fight would play out? Who would win? Is Danny Jacobs the most difficult test for Gennady Golovkin at 160 at the moment? Remember, you have to keep in mind that Canelo Alvarez at the moment is still at 154. So, is Danny Jacobs more difficult for Golovkin than Billy Joe Saunders or any of the other guys out there, Eubank Jr., etc.? Let me know in the comment section below. It's your boy Hatman, I'm out.